Jesus.
What's up, everybody? It is February 19th. It's a Wednesday, and we've got a big-time special guest, Mr. Ravi Lulla, in the house. He needs no introduction, but we'll be providing an introduction here shortly for him. We're excited to dive into some off-season content. You guys haven't heard from us in a couple weeks because it is the off-season, and we're taking things a little bit slower than we were during the season itself. But we're so excited to bring some off-season content. We got some good stuff coming up. Me and Andrew are going to dive into some off-season coaching analysis, talk about transfer portal, talk about the spring game, talk about a whole host of other things. But first, a word from our sponsors, which is us, Pipeline Jerky. Ravi, have you tried Pipeline Jerky yet? We got to get you some.
I have. I think you guys brought some to Hurrdat, like right when you guys first kicked off.
Oh, yeah. Pipeline-jerky.com. Make sure you guys check that thing out. It's pork jerky, beef jerky, directly supports the Huskers offensive line. Every single bag pays a royalty back to the players. We got a whole host of new offensive line recruits coming in. We're pumped to get them acclimated into the pipeline, get them their shirts, their picks, their new jerky. It's working. The offensive line's looking pretty good. I don't want to take full credit for it. We got some fun partnerships with Omaha Steaks coming up and some dinners coming up potentially in the offseason as soon as the offensive line is solidified. And also, check out our merch, guys, husguysstore.com. We've got some awesome gift boxes still going on. We've got some Dana Mania shirts going. We got a lot of If We Die, We Die. We need Coach Rule just came out with a couple new things. We got to get those going on shirts, Tanner, by the way. He has some good quotes. Got to get those going. Anytime that's the other thing, Rob, we were talking about before the show is anytime like our sales on the merch and the jerky, like for every win goes like through the roof. And then for every loss, it like completely plummets. So we got to get some stuff going. So husguysstore.com, make sure you check it out. We got some good stuff on there. And then finally, Underdog Fantasy. New players get 50% deposit match up to $1,000. Promo code HusGuys. We're still going. We still got some cool stuff going on. Hockey is pretty hot right now. Basketball's hot right now. Baseball coming up. So the Underdog Fantasy's got all sorts of good stuff. It's not just football. So use a promo code HusGuys. 50% deposit match up to $1,000 on Underdog Fantasy. And with that, a man who needs no introduction from me because I've listened to hundreds of hours of Ravi content. But Ravi, would love for you to introduce yourself to the Huskers audience for those who don't know you. And we want to start just getting to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ravi Lulla. I host the Hurrdat Sports live morning show every morning with Damon Benning, who absolutely needs no introduction, 7 to 10 a.m. And I also run the business operations for Hurrdat Sports in general. So that's I don't know which one's my day job and which one's the side gig, but between the two of them, I pretend to be a productive adult.
Adds up to something. Tell me about you. So I was saying kind of before the show, I've been a big Damon Benning fan for, I don't know, probably as long as he's been on the radio. He tends to be the one guy I go to that during all of the like ridiculous ups and downs. We had Mitch Sherman on earlier too. Mitch Sherman and Damon tend to be my guys who like help bring me back down to earth when I feel like the sky is falling. Damon always has like that great, he has a great touch of like, okay, actually, everything's gonna be fine. And then you guys started the show probably a couple years ago, and I've listened to Damon forever. You joined the show. I really enjoy your show. I listen to it very consistently. I'm a weekly listener. Where did the show come from? What's your background? Where'd you come from?
Yeah, so I kind of came out of nowhere, to be honest. I don't have a background in radio, really. I have always been a sports fan, grew up, born and raised in Omaha, always been a big Nebraska fan. I know people hate this. I was always a big Creighton basketball fan growing up as well. I loved basketball growing up. I'm a kid of the 90s with the Jordan Bulls and all that, and Creighton was in my backyard. So I like Nebraska basketball too. Everybody thinks I'm a hater since I'm a Creighton fan. I just like basketball. I want all basketball in Nebraska to be good. So UNO, Nebraska, Creighton, high school. I want Doane and Morningside's Iowa, I guess, but I want Doane and Bellevue and Midland. I want everybody in Nebraska to be good. UNK, everybody. So I just love basketball. So that's my pitch there for the people that hate on the J-Skers. But no, I always loved sports growing up, and I didn't really have a path, I thought, to working in sports. So it wasn't, I just got a regular adult job. I've worked in finance, risk, and fraud management for most of my adult life, and I just sort of on a whim, I did a handful of radio calls of games with my buddy who was studying broadcasting in college. And I had a ton of fun doing it. And I just thought that's all it was. I thought it was just, I did like half a season of UNO basketball in like 2009 or 2010. And I did a couple Omaha Beef games. I was basically just doing whatever gigs that he was getting as a student broadcaster. And he's like, these suck to do alone. Like, just come hang out with me. And I was like, all right, cool. And so he'd like steal me a polo from some like storage room and I'd throw it on. And I didn't even go to UNO. Like they had no idea. Like I was on the student radio station and I didn't go there. I never went there. And so I kind of got a taste for radio doing that. And I loved it, but I just, it just felt like this fun thing that I did one time. And then I kind of just started bugging people. If I'm being honest, it really is, so I went, and back in the day, Nick Hanley used to do this Friday Night Lights whip around show on, I think, 590. And he would basically send out, again, it was mostly student, a lot of them were high school kids, reporters to different games. And they basically call into this show for updates and as like little stringer reporters. And I don't know, 25, 26 at the time. So I'm like a decade older than most of the people calling in. But I was like, I emailed Nick. I was like, hey, could I just do this? And he's like, yeah. So he started sending me, like, he realized I could talk on the radio without, with say the score and say AM 590 without like stumbling over myself. And he's like,
those are the minimum.
That's
right.
What I was
looking for.
And so he's like, hey, we're going
to
start sending you out to the best games of the week. So he like would start sending me to those. I was like, hey, this is a lot of fun. And I wasn't getting paid or anything. It was just I wanted to see if there was something I could do and be on the air. And then I just I saw I don't know if you guys are familiar with Blue Jay Banter. It's this Creighton website that does a bunch of Creighton stuff. I think they're the Rivals affiliate. And I saw that they were looking for an intern for their website. And I was like, I don't really want to write. I did have a background in writing a little bit in like high school. And I wrote for Bleacher Report for a little bit, like way back in the day. I was like, I don't really want to write, but I knew they had a radio show. And I knew they did the Creighton post game. So I was like, I feel like if I could get my foot in the door, then they might let me on the radio show. So I did that. And honestly, it was just a stroke of luck. It was the year after Doug McDermott graduated from Creighton. So they were terrible, which meant nobody at Blue Jay Banner wanted to do post-game shows anymore. After just like, honestly, like it was after the first few games and Big East players like, oh, this is not going to go well. Like they lost to North Texas the last game before Christmas. And then they just started roughing Big East play. And the guys were like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, I'll do it. I will 100% will do this. And so I just got a bunch of reps doing that. And then I sort of became the full-time post-game guy. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, I'm in the door at 1620 now. I'm just going to start bothering these guys because like Blue Jay Banner was they paid for their time. So it wasn't like a quote unquote real show on the radio in the sense of the daily shows. Right. And so, but I'd run into these guys all the time at 1620. And so I just started bugging him. I don't know if you remember Stibbs from the afternoon show. He was the producer. He also produced the post-game shows. I would be like, hey, Stibbs, if you guys ever need a fill-in, let me know. And he's like, yeah, okay, why don't you like message our boss or something and let him know you're interested? Like kind of brushing me off, honestly. And I would have too. I get it. But I just honestly kept emailing people and bugging people and calling people and whatever. And what I found out about radio is eventually they will get to your name on the list because there's just, the list isn't that long.
Yeah.
And eventually people are like, oh, I'm out of town or I'm sick or my wife said I can't do it or my boss, because everybody has to have a day job and fill in radio. My boss said I can't do it. And eventually they'll get to your name on the list. And if you're not terrible, they'll call you back. And that's honestly how it worked is I just kept taking every opportunity I could get. And I did that from the time I started with from the time I started with Nick Hanley doing high school games until the time I got the show with Damon was almost 10 years of doing that. Wow. And I just really enjoyed doing it. Every time I got on the air, I loved it. And through that process, it's sort of funny that I ended up hosting a show with Damon because the morning show was the last show to let me fill in. Like the afternoon show got on board super fast. Middays, they were like, hey, if you're dumb enough to try and host 4 hours by yourself as a fill-in, go for it. And I was like, dope, I'm in. And so I got a lot of midday shifts because there's not a lot of people that want to host 4 hours solo, and I don't blame them. It sucks.
4 hours.
It is.
That's a grind.
Yeah, it's not great. I was like, hey, can we get as many guests as possible? So yeah, it's not ideal. I don't know how Happer does it every day. He's a machine. But it was finally, I think I hosted a Big Red Overreaction one game, and nice. Damon was the co-host. That was the first time I had ever worked with him, and it was after a loss, so Damon was not in a good mood. Say what you will about DB, but that man cares more about Nebraska sports than anybody I know. Like, I know some people get a little like, oh, is he even a fan? That dude takes losses harder than anybody. And so he was coming in. It was after a loss. I want to say it was like 2019 Illinois. You'll have to check me on that one on the year, but I think it was like 2019 Illinois. They were coming off a loss, and he was obviously not excited that I was filling in. Like, it was pretty clear. He had never worked with me. He thought I was just a Creighton guy too. He thought I was just a basketball guy, so he was not excited about it. And then pretty quickly within that show, he kind of perked up a little bit and was like, oh, this guy at least sort of knows what he's talking about. He's not some just brain dead moron when it comes to football. He at least actually likes football. And I started asking him, and I think the big thing for him was I didn't care that he was Damon Benning. Like, I wasn't like starstruck or intimidated by him, because I just started like peppering questions at him because I'm mad too, because I can't believe Nebraska just lost to Illinois or whoever it was.
Right.
And so I'm pretty upset too. And so I'm like, all right, DB, give me some answers here, man. Like, this sucks. Like, what's wrong? And he perked up, and kind of after that show, I actually sent him a text and I go, hey, there's a different world in which we're hosting a show together, like a daily show together. And like, I don't know this guy at all. Like, I don't know what gave me the confidence to like shoot my shot there. Yeah. But I just texted him. I was like,
just anger.
Man. Yeah. I was like, hey,
anger and emotions.
Well, we had a great time. Like, it was a great show.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, there's a different world in which we're hosting a show together. And I think we both sort of just hung on to that. And he started asking me to fill in anytime that either Gary or Michael or whoever it was at the time was going to be gone. And it just kind of turned into this relationship and friendship, and we really enjoyed hosting shows together. And so when he moved over to Hurrdat in 2022, I think was when he officially moved over, he was like, hey, you should check these guys out. That was right when they were getting Hurrdat Sports off the ground. He goes, hey, you should check these guys out. Like, they're pretty legit. Like, this could be a place we could work together. And that's kind of how it all started over at Hurrdat. I think he got some people in charge there to follow me on Twitter. Chris Gorman's like the senior vice president over there. And he followed me on Twitter. And so as soon as he followed me, I followed him back and just shot him a DM. I was like, hey, you guys do some cool stuff. I'd love to work with you guys someday. And like I said, my entire career is basically just bugging people until they said yes. And that kind of continued with Hurrdat. And eventually it worked out that they're like, hey, we want to move you over with Damon in the mornings, and kind of the rest is history there. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but that's the long way of telling you. I just kept
I'm always fascinated with that, because like, I mean, we think of it as just like, oh, I don't know, they just found this like super talented, like there's a talent hunter out there or something that's like headhunting and stuff here too. But you had to scratch and claw and fight your way into a position like this, and it's pretty awesome that now you kind of get to have this trusted voice. And like I was saying before the show, my daughter recognizes your voice now on the morning shows. But what is the future of your show and everything? I know you wanted to make sure that we touch on that as well here. That's kind of a big next step for you guys together.
For sure, yeah. So we'd been on 590 for a couple years, and we decided to make the move which had always been the plan when Bill, the owner of Hurrdat, came to Damon, and later when he came to me, he goes like, eventually this is going to be an all digital product. Right now, they had a relationship with 590, and it was sort of mutually beneficial at the time, where it was helping Hurrdat Sports get their name and voice out there, and for 590, it allowed them to have local programming on their airwaves. And so that was the situation. And eventually it was like, hey, at some point we're going to go all digital. And at kind of the end of last year, November, December, we started seriously having those discussions about making that move as our agreement with 590 was coming up. And it just made sense for us at that point to own all of our inventory, whether it was commercial breaks and ability to sell to sponsors and things like that. And the fact of the matter was, I mean, not to get too into the weeds with you here, but we do about 1 million impressions a month on the show between podcasts and live streaming and social media impressions from the clip outs and stuff that we do. And about 900 to 950,000 of those were digital anyway. And
wow.
so at that point, it became pretty clear, like, hey, we're kind of giving up some inventory and not getting a ton back in terms of voice and listenership and things like that. And so it just made sense to make the move at that point. And honestly, the big thing for us is, since we were technically simulcast on the radio stations, we had super hard outs, like we were on TV basically. So I don't know if you would ever hear on the radio, like sometimes we would get cut off at the end of an interview, or like, that was a very common problem, right? Constantly. And so
I was gonna say, one of my favorite parts of the show is when Damon is like talking, and it's like the Oscars music or whatever comes on.
Wrap it up.
Like, hey, but then right all through the he's always getting in like one more little like, oh, and then his like voice kind of like speeds up at the very end.
I don't know if you could ever see it on my face, but like we've got this clock in front of us on an iPad, and I'm trying to like wrap up with a guest or whatever, and then he'll ask a question. He'd ask a question with like 35 seconds left, and I was like, oh no, like I just know it's going, like, this is a podcast only question, I guess, which is fine, like, yeah. And so it was funny, but it was a constraint that we had, where we'd either have to cut off a guest that we were having a really good conversation with, or DB and I would be in the middle of something really interesting. We just have to stop, kind of because of the radio clock. And that was honestly for us as big of a part of it as anything, is we felt like we could deliver a better product to the 95% of the people that were listening digitally anyway, if we just move that direction. And so you can get us honestly all the same places you could before, except for on the radio. You can get it on Facebook on Hurrdat Sports and Hail Varsity. You can get it on any of the accounts on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and then on hurrdatsports.com as well. And then we'll be launching an app hopefully in a few weeks here. It takes a little while to get the apps approved by Apple and like the Android, Google Play Store, whatever it is. I don't have an Android. I don't know what that is, but it takes a little while to get those approved through their app stores and stuff. So that's what we're waiting on that process. But we'll have an app so it's easier to listen in the car. Just have it hooked up to your YouTube or your Bluetooth or whatever, the same way. And then of course you can get it through the podcast platforms like you always did. But that's the big thing for us, is just no more cutoff answers, no more abbreviated segments, no more stopping middle of conversations. And every once in a while, if we get super mad, we can swear now too. So that's great.
Perfect.
Let me ask you this, because I enjoy both the pros and cons of the off season and the in season, like, and even coming up with off season content. Like, there's plenty of content out there constantly, like, but during the season you could film a show. I mean, every hour there's so much breaking news constantly, and like so much like influx of information and game breakdowns and everything. Off season, you're manufacturing a lot of stuff, right? There's transfer portal, there's coaches stuff, which we'll dive into, but I mean, you're filming 3 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you create content for that? And like, how do you start to think about, I mean, you guys just like, you run the gamut, you cover pro sports, college sports, all sorts of stuff, but it's a long time to be talking. How do you come up with that content every day?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. It's sort of a running joke with DB and I. I do a rundown for the show every day. I put like every segment, I put a topic or two, like I've got a full rundown every day, and we get to maybe 10% of it every day. We just, and that's the thing I love about doing a show with Damon is like we're genuinely very good friends. And at this point, obviously at the start we didn't know each other, but we're genuinely really good friends at this point, and we just have great chemistry. We all like that was instant, and that's the thing that I love so much about like from the jump doing shows with him, from that first Big Red overreaction to the first time filling in with him. We just have incredible on-air chemistry where we'll just take each other in. Like the best stuff is stuff neither of us knew we were going to talk about. And we talk a lot of nonsense too. Like we get into just the stupidest thing, and we'll talk about, what we ate or what his 6-year-old's doing or, and I think because people like listening to us, they'll listen to kind of whatever, we'll like this week we've talked a little bit of NBA, which it's not a huge NBA market, right? Like Nebraska doesn't care a ton about the NBA, but because they like listening to us and because we're passionate about it, like a lot of people will get involved in the NBA discussions on our YouTube channel in the comments, and we try and be interactive with them during the show, which helps a lot. And, so I think that's a big thing is just the chemistry between the two of us. But honestly, for me, the off-season shows are almost more fun because you do get into just the total nonsense of it all, right? You can ask non-sports questions. Like you can't really, like Monday after a football game, you can't really get into too much nonsense. Like you got to kind of get after it and stay on point and at least have some structure. Like you may get to some NFL stuff during the season or whatever, but it's going to be pretty Nebraska heavy, very college football heavy, and almost exclusively football in general, right? Whereas in the off season, you just have a ton of room to have fun and be creative and come up with stupid hypothetical questions and things like that. And that's the really fun stuff to me. So, but to answer your question, honestly, I spend way too much time on the internet. That's how I come up with show topics. Like I spend so much time on social media. I spend so much time watching TV and watching old games, and I don't really even know what I'm looking for, but then something will pop out to me. I'm like, oh, that's a fun idea. And I'll scribble something down. So it's just that I spend way too much time in front of a screen. That's how I come up with 3 hours of content every day. And so does DB. Like that's the thing about Damon is that dude watches more sports than any person I know, and including myself. Like I watch a lot, and he'll be like, so I was literally, this was like a month ago. He's like, so I was watching like the 1991 NBA All-Star game the other day. And I'm like, why? What on earth could you possibly have been doing that for? And he's like, have you seen that recently? I was like, no, I was 3.5 and I never went back and got it.
I didn't catch that one.
Like, I apologize. And so, but like he watches more than any person I've ever met in my life of everything. Like he'll be like, hey, did you catch this, this Midwest or Mountain West Conference women's basketball? I'm like, no, DB, I'm not watching New Mexico women's basketball. And so like there's a lot of that, but like he watches everything. And so there's nothing I can throw at him that he's not ready for, which makes, honestly, I think for really good content.
Love it. He's a big internet guy too. He mixes it up on Twitter more than like there are times where I'm like, man, he's too big. He's so petty sometimes. I'm like, I can't believe this guy's mixing it up with strangers on the internet. But I always appreciate it. He mixes it up.
Honestly, those are my first interactions with him. I would like ask him questions and stuff from when he was doing his morning show, and like I think I started emailing him at some point. But the number of people that he like, I have to clarify with him a lot. Like, is this a person you actually know, or is this an internet person? Like when he's talking about, oh yeah, my guy JB, or my guy St. Louis Jordan. I was like, okay, how many of these people have you met in real life, and how many of them are just internet personalities that you interact with? And a lot of them start off as internet personalities, and then they become real friends. It's a really funny, it's a really funny dynamic for me. But yeah, he does. He gets really involved, and it's because he genuinely cares about the stuff that he's talking about, whether it's the NHL or whether it's Nebraska football, or like I know state wrestling starts tomorrow on the guys side for Nebraska preps. The girls are going right now. That dude loves wrestling. If I was super into wrestling and would let him, he would talk about wrestling for 3 hours a day. Like he loves wrestling.
I love the like cross sports references he'll make too. He's just like, man, did you see that that run by Emmett Johnson? It kind of reminded me of Caitlin Clark doing. I was like, wait. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's
man, I can't keep up with how much sports he does consume. He's making
the
reference.
verse. Sometimes I just have to tell him, I'm like, hey man, like that's outside my bandwidth. Like I don't have that in the wheelhouse. Which that's part of the reason he likes me is because I do have a pretty like diverse like wheelhouse in terms of stuff that I can talk about. But I have to tell him sometimes, I'm like, yeah, that's not in the Rolodex, bud. I don't know what to tell you.
Got to reel it in. Dave, go ahead.
Oh, I
Dave.
think he's on mute.
It's muted. Sorry, not to turn immediately somber, but I did listen to your most recent episode. As you know, obviously the passing of Greg Sharp this week, and Damon had, both of you guys, an extremely touching tribute to him, and we, similar to you, have listened to him for hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, and we all followed very closely his battle that he lost this week. I mean, any any impressions of him? Did you ever meet him, or what do you think his legacy will be that influenced sports broadcasting across Nebraska for you?
Yeah, so unlike Damon, I really didn't know him personally. I met him a couple times just in passing, and Damon introduced me, and we had him on the show several times. So that was my interactions with him were mostly public for that everybody kind of consumed. But I think his legacy, I don't want to sound too cheesy. I think it's just going to be kindness. Like he was such a kind man, and as good as he was at his job, as great of a voice as he had, as great of a broadcaster as he was, like he was just so kind. Like even in the interactions that I had with him on the show and on the air, like he treated me the same way he treated Damon. And he doesn't really know me. He knows Damon super duper well, obviously, for how much they worked together and how much time they spent together. And it was just this, I kind of said on the show, and I think I said on Twitter as well after he passed, like this his ability to make people feel like a friend was remarkable. And I felt, I really struggle, and this is a me problem. I really struggle with people that, like when people pass, it seems like sometimes publicly people will act like they knew the person better than they did. And so I never want to give that sense with Greg, because he deserves better than that. And I wouldn't want to do that to him and act like, it's not a personal loss for me the way that it is for Damon, right? But it is a loss for the whole state at the same time. Like he was this voice in our ears of some huge moments throughout the last, I guess, almost 18 years of Nebraska sports. And it's kind of funny. Most people identify him with football, and for good reason, but I love listening to baseball on the radio because it's baseball to me is like the perfect radio sport.
It's
where
good.
you're listening to it and you're mowing your lawn, or you're working out. I like to throw baseball games in while I'm at the gym, just because it's kind of a nice distraction. You can listen to it and know what's going on, but you don't have to be like super locked in because there is some downtime. And that's kind of where you get to know. I feel like you really get to know broadcasters during baseball games in a way that you don't in other sports, because there is just a different pace to it. And so I would love listening to Nebraska baseball with Greg and with Ben McLaughlin and Nick Hanley. And you just get this really kind of personal experience with them. And, and obviously not as many people listen to baseball as they do football. So it almost does feel more like close knit, because you do sort of feel like they're having a conversation with you as opposed to the entire state. Like when I'm listening to a football game, I know everybody's listening, right? Whereas when you're listening to a baseball game, it's a little slower paced. It feels a little more personal. And so I do think there's a ton of people that, David, we were talking before the show that, when you listen to somebody that many hours, you feel like you know them. Like you feel like they're a friend. You feel like they're a part of your life. I made the joke, but I used to listen to, back in the day, this is a long time ago now, but like Scott Van Pelt and Ryan Russillo had a show together. And I loved it. It was one of my favorite sports shows. And when they disbanded that show for Scott to go kind of do his own Sports Center thing, like I was a little heartbroken. Like it felt like I was losing. Like it felt like when you're a kid and your friend moves away from elementary school, right? You're like, oh man, like I don't get to see my friend anymore, right? That's how it feels. And and obviously to a much more serious extent with Greg and his passing, you feel like you lost a friend, whether you ever met him or not, or whether you just knew him in passing and kind of in a more professional sense like I did. It feels like a huge loss, and I think you saw that reflected in the whole state. But to kind of get back to what his legacy is, the reason you feel that way is because like that kindness that he showed in personal interactions really came through on his broadcast, that it felt like he cared as much as we did. And that's not always the case. And especially for a guy that, you know, he started as an outsider, right? Like he came from Kansas State. Like he wasn't a born and bred Nebraska guy, but man, the way that he ingratiated himself into our lives seamlessly, that's really hard to do. And it felt so genuine. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like disingenuous at any point. It felt like he genuinely cared as much as we do. And I made the analogy on the air this week. That's part of the reason I love Coach Rule so much too, is he's not from here either, but right. God, if anybody cares about the state of Nebraska more than he does, I don't know him.
Yeah. I think and you're exactly right. I think everybody feels like a closer connection to him, and we certainly are going to miss him. And what a powerful struggle that he went through publicly, so hard as a public figure. And I also, coming back to talking about you guys in your show, I think about how, because you guys are filming every single day and running every day, like the rawness of your show. I'm thinking about a few other instances too, where Damon and yourself were both raw with emotion with this. And then, Mickey Joseph was another one when that whole broke, and Damon's close relationship with him, and he had to go live with the show. And it was like, you guys, he's kind of like, I'm processing this in real time live on the radio. Like the fact that you guys have that live. And then I guess really all of last season, I felt like your show was interesting because of his close connection with his son on the team. Yeah. Like even that, where he's like, I got a kid on the team, or his whole recruiting process. So all of those examples, I think it's I feel like a closer connection with you guys because you have like all these highs and lows, but like true like lows of passing of friends, like real troubles
Jones
with Mickey
a couple
Joseph.
Weeks ago too. That one was really tough for Damon. The Calvin Jones one hit Damon super hard. I think part of it because it was not expected, right? Not that made it any easier with Greg, but you kind of like knew at some point as things weren't getting better that this day was probably going to come. Unfortunately, Calvin came out of nowhere, and that's a guy that's just a few years older than Damon, that Damon looked up to as a guy that he was kind of trying to emulate coming to Nebraska, an Omaha guy going to Nebraska, trying to be that running back in that offense, like watching DB process that live on air. And we don't really, when it's stuff like that, we don't really go over it much beforehand. Right. I kind of ask him like, hey, do you want to talk about this? That's about as much as I will go into it. And then I try and leave him the space to process it in real time. And kind of to your point, that's one of the things I'm really proud about the show is I do feel like you get to know the real versions of me and DB. Like that's who we really are. Like that's who we are as people. And that's not true for every show. And for the good or the bad, like I'm sure some people wish we were a little more buttoned up, but for the good or the bad, you get the real versions of us. And I that's one thing I'm really, really proud about is just the transparency and, like you said, kind of the rawness of like when things happen in real time and when things happen in our personal lives that either cross over sports or don't cross over with sports. There's probably mornings you can tell where it's like, hey, Robbie's not really feeling it this morning. And like, you could probably point to, it's like, oh, kind of a rough night with the blood sugars or whatever, like it's just whatever it is. It's like, oh, you had a low blood sugar, in the middle of the night and it messed up his whatever, like you could probably point to it with pretty good accuracy and get the real story of kind of what's going on there. So, or, my about a year and a half ago, this is very different, but my dog that I had for, over a decade, that was my first ever dog. She passed away after being sick for a while. And so I talked about it on air, like I eulogized her on air because she was, people say like best friend or whatever. Like I truly believe that dog saved my life. Like I was in some dark places and that dog was part of the reason I got pulled out of them, like going through divorce and stuff. And so Like I think that's one of the things I like the most about our show is it's real. You get the real versions of us, and whether it's the passing of a friend or beloved dog or just whatever's going on in our lives, like you're gonna get the real version of what we do, and you're gonna see it play out every morning on the air for 3 hours. And
yeah, it's pretty raw.
Yeah, like I think that's a cool thing to do. Like I appreciated that in shows that I listen to, and I hope people appreciate that about our show.
Yeah,
we do. And there is no easy transition out of all of this sad talk. But this is a show about off-season. This is a show about off-season national championships. So I'm going to take a hard right turn.
Where you need one of those hard radio breaks right now to get you out of it.
Hard radio break. Get out of it. I'm going to go hard right and get right into it. Is how we're going to do it. Is last night, some random blog on the internet, it was a Michigan blog, has Nebraska as a dark horse in the playoff next year. And I don't even know who was. I don't know who it was. I don't know who that guy is. It doesn't matter. He's not real. He's not even a real person. But he put Nebraska in the playoff as a dark horse contender. And that, my friends, was enough for me to get the juices going. I was like, maybe. Like, I didn't even bother looking at who read it or where it was. Somebody sent it to me. It's like, maybe.
Sure.
Maybe.
Just put some feelers out there.
So that's our hard transition into is Robbie, I know you followed us for a minute, but we're big on the offseason. We're big on like revving up the hype. And I think coming out of, the winless November was a very challenge of like trying to get the offseason hype revving back up. You win the bowl game. Now we've got some coaches coming in. We got some transfer portal folks coming in. We were February 19th, and we're already kind of getting into the playoff picture, which is amazing because usually that takes until like July to get there.
Preseason playoff picture.
We're around it.
It's really early. It's
round
really
in the
early.
corner. Usually by August, like we're definitely preseason top 25. Like that's at a minimum. Yeah. Like we always try to at least hype it up and get us like top 20, top 15. Let's talk coaches. Let's start there. We got a lot of new coaches. Andrew, you want to kick off, and how do you want to work through some of these rankings?
Yeah, I'm just going to give a little quick blurb, most of this from even just the Nebraska website on all of our hires and stuff, just to brief the fans, anybody that hasn't, spent the majority of their life deep diving into these guys' biographies and stuff. And then I think what I would want to do is just hear like a ranking of our most impactful or just like best hire per unit for all of our new hires. So we're going to go back to Holgerson first. His blurb: 6 seasons as an FBS coordinator. His offense has had an average national finish of 2nd in passing offense, 3rd in total offense, and 6th in scoring offense. Guy's an offensive guru. I'm not going to say my opinions right now, but love it. John Butler, 20 years NFL experience, 10 years college football. From 2018 to 2023, the Bills defense, where he was at before he came to us, they ranked 1st in the NFL in total yards per game, passing yards allowed per game, passing yards allowed per completion, passing yards allowed per attempt. Had some pretty good success there. Mike Eckler, #1 punt return average in the country. He's coming over as our special teams coach, coming back to Nebraska. He's an absolute psychopath. They loved him at Tennessee. They were very sad to see him go. I'm very excited to see him jumping around on our sidelines again. Phil Snow, I threw him in here as well. He's just been with Rule kind of everywhere he's been. He has 37 years of coaching experience, 8 of them in the NFL. He was with Rule back to 2019 at Baylor. They reached the Big 12 championship. They were 2nd nationally in takeaways that year. They were kind of known for their offense, but and then they were 3rd in interceptions, 8th in sacks per game. They actually had a rock solid defense that year too. And then 4 seasons at Temple, he was also on the defensive side of the ball. His squad led the AAC in defense in 2015 and 2016 when they won their conference championship. Both of those years, they were 11th in scoring defense as well. EJ Barthel, Barthel. He got rehired today, but there was some whispers.
Got paid too.
He got paid extra $150,000 a year. So we'll keep that in mind. But as the running backs coach, he actually got a little bit of it sounds like some fans have some beef with him, but we'll talk about that. We were 2nd in the Big Ten in rushing in 2023. That's one of his laurels. He was at UConn as well under Jim Mora. And then we had Dante Dowdell. He actually had 12 rushing touchdowns. That was the most by a Husker running back in 6 seasons. Then we are rounding it out with our last.
It's a very low bar.
Yeah, 12.
12.
Won a game. Addison Williams, secondary, 15 and overall years of experience. His big year where he kind of was considered a breakthrough coach was 2023 at UCF. At UCF, they were third in team pass efficiency defense. They also they led the Big 12 that year at 196.7 pass yards per game allowed. So Addison Williams coming over as their secondary coach. He also he was at Coastal Carolina. I didn't realize as well when I was diving in. So he was at Coastal Carolina. They were third nationally in 2020. They had 16 interceptions that year, 16th in team pass efficiency defense. That was before his time at UCF. And then he's also pretty savvy on the recruiting trail. He's the lead recruiter on 3 top 40 safeties over the last 2 seasons to UCF. Phil Simpson, outside linebackers coach. He was a defensive analyst at Florida State this last year. He's basically coming back to us. He was also, I think he's going to be pretty big on the Florida recruiting trail. He led his team to a state championship appearance. He was Miami Herald Coach of the Year in 2021 there. They went 23-4 over his final 2 seasons. So he's got a nice Florida recruiting connection along with Addison Williams there. And then the final would be Dakel Shorts Jr. I think a pretty exciting hire. He's rejoining Dana Holgerson. First season was 2021. As a coach, he coached Tank Dell at Houston. He had several like top 15 rankings. Fantastic season for Tank Dell. In 2023, this was an interesting stat. Houston's first season in the Big 12. Among the league's top 11 graded underclassmen wide receivers, 5 of them were from Houston. And then Dane Key and Hardley Gilmore are following him here already, and they're revamping our wide receiving core. So, Dakel Shorts, Phil Simpson, Addison Williams, E.J. Barthel, Phil Snow, Mike Eckler, John Butler, Dana Holgerson. That is a ton of turnover. It just took me like a half hour to even get through 2 sentences each on these guys. But those are the brief rundowns of them. I think I really like how we have remade things overall, but some people may not feel the same about certain hires. Who amongst that group do you see is like the most impactful, best hire, like immediate 2025 benefits?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. First, so we talked to there's a guy that listens to the show that is a professional in the world of like college search firms, and he bases everything off of analytics. He co-founded Matrix Analytical, which is this like analytics-based, metrics-based college coach searching firm. And he talks to us all the time. And he gave me the numbers according to their stats and their metrics and everything. Nebraska upgraded their coaching ability by about 10% this year. That includes, now there's a little bit of a
Bartu.
So it's Bartu's partner, Adam McClintock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had him on. He's awesome.
He's the best.
He is brilliant.
He messages me and DB all the time. Like we talk all the time. Love Adam. He gives us so much time and information, even off air, which I really appreciate. But he went into, I think he said the offense was about a 10% upgrade. The defense was about break even with the hires they made versus the guys they lost, which because Tony White obviously is a loss.
Yep.
Pot Roast is Knighton is a big loss as well.
Yep.
But they about broke even on defense, and then they upgraded offense by almost 10%. So, like in general, according to the numbers, they got a lot better. And I think that was, I can't remember if that was right before or right after Eckler got hired. So it might even be better now with Eckler. So I just want to start with that premise in terms of the coaching.
I like that. That.
The most impactful ones for 2025, there's 2 main guys, and that's Dana Holgerson, bringing him back, which it doesn't totally feel new because we saw him at the end of last year, but retaining Dana Holgerson is enormous. That's a huge huge upgrade from what they had with Satterfield. And I like Satterfield as a coach and as a from what I know about him as a person. It just wasn't fitting the way it needed to, right? And so Holgerson's a great addition and then retention from last year to this year. And then the other one to me is Mike Eckler. Those are the two big ones. Those are the two areas where I think Nebraska has the most area to improve. And if you can improve in those areas, then that does get you into that conversation of, 9-ish wins, which means you're going to be in the conversation to be a dark horse.
Here we go.
Playoff contender. I mean, I went through this whole thing last year, right? Where 9 wins get you close. I went back about 10 years and went through the final polls before the conference championship games. And I want to say in 8 out of the 10 years, at least one 9-win team would have been in the top 12. So that's the benchmark. You get to 9, you start to be in the conversation. You get to 10 and you're in a power conference, you got to feel pretty good most years. But you get to 9, you're going to be in the conversation a lot of years. And so, it's not too hard pressed for me to think, okay, if you clean up special teams by itself, that might be worth a couple wins.
Honestly, yes.
Really, I mean, seriously, if you can, because it's not just the stuff that we saw went wrong, right? It's also the decisions that had to be made because they couldn't trust it. That's the domino effect of the special teams that we don't really, there's no number for that, right? There's no number for going forward on 4th and 3 instead of kicking a field goal because you don't think you can get the snap off, right? Like there's no measurement for that because it's a thing that didn't actually happen. But that decision-making process really impacts gameplay. And I know people sometimes will get on Rule about in-game management and things like that. When you don't feel good about being able to kick a field goal or being able to get a punt off, that impacts your in-game decisions pretty dramatically. And so for me, I think special teams by itself is worth a win or two. I think getting the offense optimized by itself is worth a win or two. You average that out, a win and a half each, all of a sudden you're at 9 wins in the regular season, and you're in that conversation for being a dark horse playoff team. So for me, those are the two biggest ones, no-brainers. If we want to get in the weeds a little bit on some of the other assistants, I'm happy to do that too, because I do think there are some pretty major impacts in some of the other hires, but those are the two just right off the top rope where I'm going, hey, this team is going to win more games this year because of those two guys, full stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's just on the Eckler one to me, that's like Holgerson, we've been singing his praises since, November, since he showed up. But Eckler to me, and it just fixes exactly like you're saying, like you stop finding ways to lose, which we are so good at. And I think, so the Chiefs made their run and won 17 straight one-score games, right? I think the number was 17 straight. And then teams like Iowa, God forbid, like the Chiefs and Iowa, like, and not to compare the two of them, but like they just don't screw up on special teams. And like they both, like the Chiefs just kept stumbling their ways all the way to the Super Bowl, but they don't screw up ever. They don't fumble. They don't turn the ball over. They don't miss field goals. They don't do any of those like stupid things. And then other teams like self-destruct. And you could, like the bar for me for special teams is so low to just like get to like punt the ball, like even in the bowl game, what they brought back point after attempt for 2 points. It's like, there's just unthinkable things happen that you're just like, just don't do unthinkably stupid things. And we probably beat UCLA. We probably beat USC. We probably beat Illinois. Like there's 3 right there.
The only other one I would say maybe cracks that top 2 it would actually be Kel Shorts. The reason being, his reuniting with Holgerson, I think, is a little bit bigger than we realize. Under Holgerson, his 6 times that he was a coordinator, 6 times he finished top 3 in passing offense every single time amongst different schools. And you're going to need a wide receivers coach that is going to work like in tandem, hand in hand with you and stuff there as well. So absolutely on Eckler, absolutely on Holgerson. I would put Kel Shorts at number 3 there, though, and pretty close behind because he's already working with – he's got Dane Key coming over. He's got Hardly Gilmore, who's not fully Gilmore, just hardly Gilmore, but he's going to be very good. And then Nijah Hunter, coming over from Cal already as well. Like, that's a revamped receiver room that you've got some new tools to work with. And I don't want to be the first offense that's not top 3, as with Dana Holgorsen as a coordinator to start the year.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you on Shorts. I almost wanted to put Holgorsen and Shorts together, and just group them together, kind of like you did there, because that was my next one. I think he's probably my next one in terms of that group below Holgorsen and Eckler, because as you mentioned, like getting those two guys back together, but also if you want to talk about another area that can really improve, the wide receiver room really could have improved last year, and I don't think it was entirely because of personnel. Like Isaiah Nair is probably going to get drafted based on his physical abilities. And we did not see an NFL wide receiver out of Isaiah Nair last year. We didn't, right? Jamal Banks looked incredibly different after Dana Holgorsen took over than before he took over.
Sure.
Jalen Lloyd didn't take the leap from year 1 to year 2 that I thought he was capable of. Really the only guy that, and I think this is mostly a Ja'Cory Barney thing because he's kind of an obsessive psycho about football and getting better in practice. Like that dude loves football. Like that is the only guy that kind of throughout the course of the year, I was like, oh man, I'm really impressed with him based on what I thought coming in. So that's the other areas, wide receivers. And not only is the coaching a huge upgrade, like Kentucky was not happy to lose Shorts. That was a huge loss for them. But also the talent in that room, you mentioned Gilmore and Key coming over. You mentioned Hunter. They've also got between Cortez Mills and Mosey coming in. Like those are two really, really big. I think they might play. Jeremiah Jones on offense as well. I know a lot of people recruited him as a safety.
Yeah,
I think he might get a shot on offense. I think that maybe was the thing that ended up giving Nebraska the edge over Missouri, is that they were going to give him a shot on offense. I could be wrong on that. We haven't even got to spring yet, but that's a sense that I get. But you've got, that's 6 guys right there, 5, even if we don't include Jones, 5 guys, plus Ja'Cory Barney, plus Demetrius Bell might have been the best freshman wide receiver they brought in last year, and he didn't play at all.
Don't sleep on Demetrius Bell. He was pushing for starting time going into the season.
He started the spring game last year, right? So that's a guy. I'm sure we'll get to that, but that's a guy that that all of a sudden looks like a pretty interesting receiver group. And if you've got a guy like D'Keil Shorts coaching that group, all of a sudden I feel a lot better. And the long way around this is if you can get Dylan Raiola to look like a 5-star quarterback, then that's where all bets are off in terms of what is possible for this season. And putting Dana Holgorsen around him, having Glenn Thomas for another year as quarterbacks coach, having D'Keil Shorts take care of the wide receivers, and getting all of those new guys in the room, you're putting Dylan Raiola in the best possible position to be successful. And that's honestly, that's the real key, is if you can get Raiola to look like he did in the first 3 games of the season versus how he did in the middle of the season. Like that's where you're really going to see, or if you can get him to look how he did against Wisconsin, that's where you're really going to see, like, if you want a 3-game improvement, get the most out of Dylan Raiola, and that's your 3 games right there.
Oh yeah, 100%. I just have these visions of, I'm looking back on, the Houston offenses, the West Virginia offenses, like these were feared teams to play. But I'm looking at the talent that we have, and it does stack up. Now, I know he had like the Pat White years and whatever, and all those teams and stuff, like at West Virginia and Tank Dell and players like that. But they weren't exactly like highly recruited, highly touted players. Like we've got these 4-star guys at every position, and Dylan as the centerpiece here. These teams, like, there's no reason this offense can't be as good as those. Like just on paper. You've got him with his old wide receivers coach. You've got at least 4 or 5 capable wide receiver pass catchers. You've got Emmett Johnson that's going to be one key piece that, like, can he live up to the hype here a little bit? but he showed that he can catch the ball out of the backfield. I tweeted today he somehow this year finished 4th all time in catches for a running back. Like this is a new concept here, throwing the ball to your running back too. Like if he keeps that over the course of the season, like he's going to shatter Marlon Lucky's record and stuff there too. I mean, that's just another weapon for him to be using. I would say you've got as much talent as he's had in previous stops, and so there's plenty of reason for optimism for the offense. Now, will it all click? Will the offensive line gel? We've got new transfers coming in. Rocco Spindell, all these guys that kind of new faces on campus, that's always going to play a factor, but you can see it, you can visualize like what we're seeing. This is not just Kool-Aid. This is like, okay, the best offensive mind in like ever, given a whole host of talent to start with. I think that's what Holgorsen came back for too. He's like, yeah, like I can work with this.
How can we lose? It's like no one watched any of the games at the end of the season. What could possibly go wrong?
No, I do think you make a really good point about the talent that is there, because you like Pat White was a 3-star coming out of high school. I believe Steve Slayton was a 3-star coming out of high school.
Sure.
Tank Dell was a 2 or 3-star coming out of high school. Like he's done this. It's not like you go to West Virginia and you go, oh man, they really tore it up in the recruiting rankings, and
Right.
Houston really tore it up in the recruiting rankings. Like they got some good guys for sure. Like they won a huge battle for I think like Noel Devine was under his watch, and that was like one of the most like coveted, wide receiver, running back recruits at the time, but it's not like he's been doing this with Alabama and Ohio State level players. Like it's entirely possible Dylan Raiola is the most talented quarterback he's ever dealt with. Like that's on the table, right?
Yeah, it's like Case Keenum is like his second. I mean, which he's good. I mean, he's great, but like I don't know who Case Keenum is without Dana Holgorsen. I don't think.
Yeah, so like there's a very good argument to make that this is the best crop of talent he's dealt with in his career, and I'm really excited to see what that ends up looking like.
Yeah. Let's get into, speaking of rest in peace to the spring game. Hot topic right now.
Yeah, what are we doing, man? What's the vibe on the ground? What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of if I'm being honest, I'm kind of upset about it.
Me too.
I really like the spring game, and maybe it's dumb. I know that's especially like, I don't know if amongst fans that's a hot take. I know amongst media members that's a pretty hot take. Most media members do not care about the spring game at all. I know a lot of media members that not just don't go, but won't even watch the spring game just because they're like, I can't learn anything, whatever. It's Nebraska football in April, man. Like I'm going to watch it. Like it's a thing that we get is kind of it's kind of the carrot, where it's our little reward, not to go all Christoph Waltz on you. It's like a reward. But like it's this little reward in the desert of the off season to say, hey, this is what we've been doing. And you get to see your favorite thing in the world for 3 hours on a Saturday, and you're not going to see it again for 4 months, and you haven't seen it for 5 or 6 months. Like it's just a little treat for fans. And if that's all it's good for, it's worth it. Because guess what? The only reason Nebraska football matters at all is because we make it matter. Like that's fans. The only reason. There's no reason on earth Nebraska should be any different than any of the Dakota schools, which have great programs, right? But the level of financial and time and resource commitment that Nebraskans have just said, hey, we're going to be good at this. And if we're not going to be good at it, we will spend every dime trying to be good at it again. Yeah. And like, that's the only difference between Nebraska and Kansas. The only difference between Nebraska and Iowa State is that we just care so much more than everybody else. There's no reason on earth Nebraska should have 5 national championships, but we do. There's no reason on earth Nebraska should have the best facilities and be in the best financial shape of any school in the country, but we are. Like that's a fact. Like you heard Coach Rule talk about it with I think Josh Pate earlier this week, right? Where he's like, yeah, a lot of teams are going to mate that payroll for the first year, the 2022 million, but what about the year after that? Are they still going to have, are they still going to have NIL funds after that to pay everybody else? And what do you do after? What are you going to do after the first year when you had to fundraise to get to that $22 million? He's like, Nebraska's fine. We've got it. We've got the revenue to make that payroll every single year. He said that's part of the reason he came here to Nebraska. Like, why do you think that exists? There's nothing inherent about Nebraska where that should be the case, that we're in as good a financial position as Ohio State or Alabama or anybody else. There's nothing about Nebraska except the fact that we want it to be that way.
Yeah.
And that is enough of a reason to me to be like, okay, here's your little treat. You can bring 70,000 of you and your closest friends to the spring game in April. You deserve this. Like, and here's the thing. If Nebraska goes out and make the college football playoff, nobody's going to care that the spring game didn't happen, right?
No, it doesn't
Nobody.
matter.
But if it doesn't, like if the wins don't come and you're taking things away, like you better be careful there. Like,
yeah, that's right. I mean,
I know it feels like the love of Nebraska fans is limitless, but there is a limit always to everything, right? And I don't want to find it. I don't want to find what that limit is. I don't think it's the spring game, but I don't want to find out.
Yeah, it's just, it gives you something. And I think, media members don't like it, but we're not media, but I love it. Like that is like the midway point. I think especially in this new world of football where like we got an entire new coaching staff every year. We have entire new players every year. Like how do you get to know these players unless you get to see something, something of like, who you get, you get to see him come out and then you get to watch the Dylan Raiola highlights for 6 months at least of like giving you something to go off of. And I agree. It's like, that's strategically like rules sitting there like, okay, my players are getting poached. There's tampering happening. It's a showcase for my players. Like I sort of get it, but I also think everybody else does it.
Everybody has one.
I know everybody has it. And like that was it's such a like thump our chest ability to say like, we sold out our spring game and like, look at, Michigan's half empty stadium and look at A&M's half empty stadium. Like we sell ours out and like, that's right. I struggle a little bit with his rationale of like, oh, we're promoting the players and then they all transfer. I don't know. It feels a little hollow in that regard, but what do you think of that?
The question there is like, will the tampering, I just think it's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the spring game is, I mean, it might be a factor, but it's not the factor. Like these coaches know who's good.
So, I have I have a pretty easy solution. Just don't put it on TV. Let us have it. Just don't put it on TV.
Right? Do send it to Huskers to tweet relentlessly, and we will promote it into oblivion. Like, this is what we literally like. We live for this.
Like I understand. I agree. I think the tampering is a little bit of a hollow reasoning. What I honestly, and I don't know. I haven't talked to him. Him and DB are pretty tight. That doesn't extend to me as far as the relationship with Coach Rule. Although he did dap me up at Big Ten Media Day. So that was a pretty cool moment for me. But I think what he really wanted to say was, hey, we had 2 starters go down in the spring game last year. I don't want that to happen again. If he had just said that, I'd be like, all right, cool. Like guys kind of go, like the adrenaline's different coming out in front of 70,000 people. And like, I get that it's different in a practice that way. I also think like, hey, we saw a guy tear his ACL in the 1890 practice last year too. So
they hurt themselves in the weight room too. I mean, it's like, Tiger Woods hurts himself golfing. It like happens like all the time.
Or driving. Driving. But you gotta be careful there. But no, I think that's what he wanted to say. I think long term he is worried about the tampering, but I look at last year and I go, did anybody of consequence transfer after spring? Because I don't think so.
He said they did, but I was like,
I know that they got overtures. I know that they had opportunities, but I don't think anybody of consequence left after the spring. So maybe he's trying to get out in front of it. I get that, but I think it's a thing that fans care about. I think especially for young fans, like the first game I ever went to was a spring game as a kid because it was cheap and it was a little easier to navigate for my parents than than a traditional game was. And I know a lot of people.
We can't lose. So that's got to be a factor.
That's true.
Lose.
Always a W.
You don't leave depressed. That's fantastic.
It's great.
It's a game we can't win.
I'm still waiting for Frankie London to break out as a star from that first spring game that I went to. So,
everything's changing so fast. I appreciate, rules closer to things like, we trust Rule. And I think we just got a comment. It's like, trust Rule. He knows stuff behind closed doors. I think college football is changing so dramatically, and so quickly, like year on year, that like it will stabilize, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years, I'd like to think. And like right now, when we started Pipeline Jerky 2 years ago, we were just trying to raise $1 million for the collective to be in the top 5. $1 million got you to be like a top 5 collective in the country. And now Ohio State just bought a national championship for $25 million. I mean, there's no other business on earth that goes like 1 to 25, like in payroll expense, of which who knows what this year's number is going to be. Is it going to be 30? Is it going to be 40? So those numbers are crazy. And I feel like in Rule's defense, like, yeah, I'm sure people are coming in and saying, if you make 100, I'll give you 200. If you make 200, I'll give you 400, and like for a player, they're probably taking those things. As it stabilizes though, I hope we can come back to a spring game of like, okay, we've got contracts in place, 2 to 3 year deals, like whatever this ends up being on the transfer portal side, like, can we bring the spring game back? Like, I hope it's just not dead forever. And it's more like it's mayhem right now. Players are doubling their salaries every year, something like that. Cause it is, to your point, it brings fans in, brings us in. You get to know the players, you get to really know them. And especially, I keep saying this transfer portal era, like you don't get to develop a relationship with these players over the course of 5 to 7 seasons like you do when you follow the kid from Bellevue West or Bellevue East or West Side or Central or whatever, and you get to know him. Like now it's like, okay, Dane, we got a bunch of wide receivers from Kentucky, which is awesome. But when are we going to get to know him? September? Like you got to wait.
He's going to be here how long before? I mean, he's got 1 year here, right?
Yeah, he'll be here 6 months. It's the same as like
grateful. Like
I like laugh at like Dowdell. It was like Dowdell was on campus for like 84 days.
Yeah, we just met him.
Like he was on campus 84 days. And if we didn't have the spring game, if you don't have the spring game, then you literally get like 6 weeks worth of the guy, and then they're gone. And so it's, I don't know, it gives you that opportunity to develop a little bit deeper like appreciation for them. Maybe that's just selfish. Maybe people don't actually care. But
the only other piece of validation that I've maybe seen is Ohio State kind of coming out and saying, okay, maybe we're actually going to back off the gas pedal with no spring game as well. But they're calling it a spring showcase. They're having something. So do you think that if they're coming off a national title, and for them to be maybe following suit here and maybe trying not to televise it, does that give you any validation for this?
Yeah, so I certainly don't think Matt Rule's alone here. Ole Miss kind of did something similar, I think, last year. A lot of schools around the country don't do a game exactly, right? Like they'll do sort of a structured scrimmage or whatever, right? Like it's not a game the way Nebraska kind of puts a game together and typically has for the spring. And I'm okay with that. I really am. I just want something that looks like football. Like I'm not really interested in like a 7-on-7. I'm not really interested in like if they want to do a skill showcase too, that'd be cool because I like those. I like, when they do them at the Pro Bowl or whatever, I like that kind of stuff. Just because I'm a dork and I grew up in like the 90s and 2000s where you'd have like Jeff Garcia doing these Pro Bowl whatever, like these QB competitions and stuff. And you're like, maybe
you can throw it, Brett.
Yeah, and you're like, maybe why can Jeff Garcia only throw it 28 yards? But it's like I like some of that stuff too, but like I also need the other thing, right? I need the thing that actually looks like football. And part of it for me, honestly, is with all these guys that come in spring, I just want to see them. Like, I know I'm not a professional coach or scout or whatever for football, but I like to get an idea of what I think they could be in the fall and sort of project a little bit. And selfishly, it gives us something to talk about on the morning show. But I do think there's a point, and I do think a lot of high-level coaches around the country agree with Coach Rule about, hey, like, why would I put my players on display here just for other people to see how much better we've gotten them over the last 6 months or year, or because it's not just about the new guys, right? It's about guys that have, like, nobody's seen Demetrius Bell for over a year at this point, right?
Yeah.
What if he comes out and balls out in the spring game and he looks at the room and he's like, I got like 6 other guys in this room. Like, maybe I go to Kentucky. They're looking for some receivers,
Yeah.
like, or whatever the case is, right? That, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I do understand the point. I just think that there's a way to do it to both protect the investment Nebraska's made in these players and honor the investment that the fans have made in the program by giving them something that they want to see. If it turns into like a fan day or something like that, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. Like, I want to see something that at least resembles football.
I just need a little, like there's just give me a little teaser of like, it doesn't need to be much. Even if you do the Jeff Garcia, give me like a Dylan Raiola long ball toss, something. And then because then you could just be like, oh, he's fixed. Like that's all, you just kind of get that. That's what the spring game does for me. Is you're like, Dylan throws it 70 yards. Like, oh, he's going to complete every long ball next year. No problem. Or it's somebody takes their shirt off and you're like, that guy's been working out.
It's the trailer for the upcoming season.
That guy's been working out, and Raiola's never going to there's going to be no incompletions, and Demetrius Bell's extremely fast. And give me a little bit of that. Like, oh wow, look, he's super fast. He ran really fast. Like, that's it. I don't need much. I don't need real football. I just need like a little juice to just be like, that was fixed. Good. Holgerson fixed it. Got it. Hey, look, we can punt now. Eckler fixed the punting game. Sick. Bam. Check. Off season rolling, we're already in the playoff discussion, and then we'll just start revving up into May, June, July, and then it'll just be off to the races. Just a little.
Yeah. I mean, we sound like drug addicts, to be honest. We're like, I just need a little taste. Just just a little bit, just to hold me over. No, I get what you're saying. I just need it to look kind of like football. I need it to look enough like football that I can make my grand proclamations every morning and be like, this guy is going to be great and whatever, I just need it to look a little bit more like football than a skills competition or a 7-on-7 game, or if that's all it is, obviously I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to consume it, and I'm still going to make ridiculous conclusions based off of those things. But I would prefer there's at least pads on at some point. Give me a half shell, give me helmets and shoulders, something. I need a little bit to make me feel like I'm watching real football.
Hypothetically, who would you be most excited to see in a hypothetical spring game this year? And that extends to the transfer portal, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like you don't get a ton out of line play in the spring game because they already have rules about blitzing and hitting the quarterback and stuff like that anyway. So I feel like that's hard to tell. But I'm really excited to I want to see the wide receivers, I want to see that group. I want to see, I want to see Dane Key. I want to see Hunter. I want to see Gilmore. I want to see, I want to see Cortez Mills. I want to see Mosey. I want to see the wide receivers, and I want to see Dylan, I know that he's not new, but I do think we're going to see a different version of him with the new coaching staff, with the new weapons. That to me, we talked about earlier with the coaches, but that to me is going to be the difference. And so in terms of newcomers I think I'll actually get to see something from in the spring game, if there were a spring game, it would be the wide receivers group. In general, I'm really excited to see, I'm sort of fascinated by Deshaun McCullough. Mm-hmm. That guy fascinates me, and sort of
his radar too.
Yeah, and he's got a super versatile skill set, and he's a huge dude, but he's played some safety and he's played some linebacker, and I'm hearing maybe he might play some edge for Nebraska, and I'm like, okay, this guy is really intriguing, and that's that's an all bus guy, right? That guy gets off the bus and you go, holy crap. Yeah. That dude looks like you want a football player to look. And so I'm super intrigued by him. I'm really intrigued by Williams and Winery to see if they can help him figure it out, because skill set wise, Nebraska hasn't had an edge rusher with that skill set since, if you thought Prince Will's skill set was impressive, and Winery is kind of even another half a step up from there. I don't want to hate on Prince Will just because he left. He had a really impressive skill set, obviously, but physically, Enwineri is everything Prince Will is, and probably a little bit more, just from a frame standpoint. If they can get the most out of him, those are kind of the two guys, because man, I'm watching the Super Bowl and I go, okay, if you can get pressure with 4, everything's possible.
Oh my
Like
God.
everything's on the table if you can get pressure with 4. And
Yes.
so I'm looking at guys on Nebraska's roster or joining Nebraska's roster that I think can help get pressure with 4. And those are the guys, again, probably not in the spring game. You're not going to see a ton of pressure, even if they have something that resembles football. But in the fall, I'm looking at guys that can help Nebraska get pressure with 4 and be able to drop 7 guys into coverage. Because guess what? If you got 7 guys into coverage, they don't even have to be that good. Like just honestly, you've got 7 guys in coverage.
Yeah.
Like you win the numbers game, you're fine. And so you don't want them to fall down at the line of scrimmage or anything. But if they're functional college football players and you can get pressure with 4, your back 7 is going to be fine. And they've got a lot of options back there to make sure that those guys are at the bare minimum functional. So those are the guys like Enwineri and McCullough.
You mentioned Keona Davis too.
I love Keona
on your show, and I mean, we talk about offense because that's what gets butts in the seats a lot of the time. But man, it makes me salivate thinking about Nwaneri on one side and Davis on the other. Just an absolute wrecking crew. I'm a little worried about the nose tackle position there, but I digress.
Yeah.
If you get those guys coming off the edge, that's 2 potential NFL dudes on either side. I mean, we haven't had that in a bit either.
100%. And I understand the concern with the interior defensive linemen. I think they're going to play differently. So you don't have to have like a 1-to-1 replacement for like a Ty and a Nash, if that makes sense, right? Like they asked a lot from those guys because they could, kind of the same thing. Not that either one of those guys is Sue, but you play differently when you've got Ndamukong Suh than you do the next year when you just have Jared Crick, who's a really, really good player still, but he's not Ndamukong Suh, right? So you've got different guys with different skill sets, and so you're going to ask different things of them. I think you're going to see a lot more 4-man fronts this year as opposed to your 3-man fronts, where having a dominant nose tackle or nose guard in a 3-man front is so much more important than it is on a 4-man. You can get a little more creative and cover some things up a little bit more in a 4-man front than you can in a 3. And I think that's what they're going to do. And let's be honest, if you can get pressure, then that sort of solves almost everything. It just really does. If you can get pressure with those 4 guys, it kind of just solves everything. The penetration from if the interior defensive lineman or the rush ends or whatever, like if you can get home with 4, whether it's on a run or a pass, sort of everything else works out. So I do understand the concern because it feels like there's more unknowns there than there are some other places. But you're also bringing in a guy from the Chiefs who's been pretty successful with that defensive line over the past handful of years.
God, how did I not even mention him in our hires? Braden.
Yeah, like that's a big one. Bringing him in from the Chiefs, like they've had a really good defensive line, and
Jones. I mean, they are a wrecking crew.
I think you can look at that and have some confidence that they're going to figure it out with the pieces they have, because they're as talented pieces. They're just not. They don't fit the same mold as the guys that left.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Robbie, we want to respect your time and everything here too. Super appreciate all your insight, especially somebody that's a little bit just one step closer to the program than we get to be. So we like to live through our guests here and stuff a little bit. But Dave, you want to take it out? Kind of our final closing thoughts and questions.
Yeah, I mean, most importantly, where can we find you? Tell our listeners, users.
Promote yourself.
Yeah, so mostly on Twitter. It's at R.A. Lulla. It's RALULLA. If you follow me there, I tweet out the show every morning. You'll get my random thoughts on sporting events and every once in a while I talk about how cool dogs are and stuff, but that's about it. I don't I mostly stick to snarky comments about sports and things like that. But if you want to follow me there or follow at Hurrdat Sports on any of your social channels, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, you'll find the show along with I think that's the thing that maybe people that follow the show don't know is we put out a ton of content, and I almost said they, because I pretty much only do the show, but we have a whole staff of people that do coverage at Nebraska football, Nebraska basketball, Creighton basketball, Omaha hockey. We've got, I think, the best preps coverage in the state through NEB Preps, which is also part of Hurrdat Sports. For people that don't know, Hale Varsity is a part of Hurrdat Sports as well. All of those banners are kind of under the same flag there, but we have so many talented people that put out incredible content. Like anything in the state that you're hoping to find, like we've got you covered. So make sure you check out all those channels as well, because especially this week with state wrestling, I'm hoping to make it out either Friday or Saturday. But that's a super cool event. That's, again, kind of a unique to Nebraska and how much we care about things. I don't think you see a lot of state wrestling championships that sell out like an 18,000 seat venue.
That's
and the way it's set up for wrestling, I think it's actually ends up being closer to 20,000. And I was talking to DB this morning, like he can't find tickets for anybody to get in for Thursday and Friday. So it's a super cool thing. So if you can't get in, you're one of those people that can't get tickets, make sure you follow Hurrdat Sports and NEB Preps. I work with a ton of people that are way more talented than I am, and it's super cool to see them do their thing as well. So if you want to follow Hurrdat Sports along with, my personals, that's always good.
Love it. Well, shout out to you guys. We're big fans of the show, big fans of Hurrdat. Love being a part of the Hurrdat podcast network. We appreciate you being on the show. Thanks everybody for listening. We crossed 1,000 tonight. Thanks to you, Ravi. Appreciate it. Check out the show. We'll be sharing out some clicks afterwards. Thank you to Ravi, and we'll catch you guys in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Ravi.